If you've met me, you know I love three major things: the ocean, horror stories, and corned beef. That last one has nothing to do with this video, but I wanted you to know that about me. The important thing is that the video game Bioshock has the first two in spades. Today we paint up a Bioshock-inspired Necromunda gang. Hey ghouls, my name's Blake Rhea, and this is Love, Death, and Dice. One of my fondest memories is of my mom buying me a copy of the original Bioshock for the Xbox 360. I'm realizing some of you Zoomers might not know what that console is. I'm old. The game planted so many passions in me that hold true to this day, primarily the love and fear of nautical imagery. In the world of Necromunda, there is an ocean called the Sump Sea, a ghastly place where instead of salt water, it is the collective grime and gunk of the planet's history that houses horribly mutated creatures. There are those who dive into this grotesque ocean searching for treasures long lost. That is gonna be my gang. The base for this build will be the Ironhead squats. The rounded armor and weapons will be perfect for recreating the diving suits worn by Big Daddies. We will need to make some adjustments though. Firstly, I ordered more closed helmets. They have a spotlight on them that is similar to the lenses on diving suits. I did try some 3D printed divers helmets, but I couldn't find any that scaled right. I was able to figure out the iconic Big Daddy drill though. I took my champion and lopped off that Medicae fist of his and surgically attached a fancy new drill from the Grundstock gun hauler kit. Perfect scale, it looks great. As far as my other gangers go, I've never played Necromunda, so I have no idea of what loadouts are good. I just picked the weapons that look closest to Big Daddy rivet guns as well as fit into my meager credits budget. Speaking of credits, he's way out of my purchase range now, but I did treat myself to the Exo Driller. He's the biggest daddy of all these daddies. I'd like these bases to be of an underwater facility that was slowly being eaten away by salt water and rust. To achieve this, I used 32mm Necromunda bases, mainly the ones with numbers and other icons. The Exo Driller was too big for any Necromunda bases of mine, so I cut up some floor bits and will fill in the gaps later with texture paste. Once the team is built, they're ready to prime with Chaos Black. This will be a good undercoat for all the metallics and darker colors. The majority of each model will be copper armor, so let's start with that. Using an airbrush, I coated everything in dark umber. This will be the cooler shadows of my copper. To bring in the copper material, I dry brushed dark bronze over everything. Then I dry brushed a highlight of, you guessed it, copper, to bring out the brightest points and to sell that this material is in fact copper. The end result is very gradual jumps between my shadows, midtones, and highlights while still convincing the viewer of the material. On the topic of copper, where in Rapture have you ever seen clean metallics? Nowhere. I slathered on enough dirty down verdigris to make a shipwreck jealous, and while that dried, I wiped away the raised areas with a makeup sponge. The key to this weathering is a fine balance between matte bluish areas and bright copper patches. This effect paint will most assuredly leave a texture that will show through the next layers of paint. To avoid this, do a more targeted dirty down verdigris, or, like me, just live with it because you like the texture. Once all of that was properly dried, add back in some bronze or copper to taste to get that weathering ratio just right. I focused on touching up areas with a lot of scraping, like the Exo's claw. On other metals like the drill, barrels, and other select trim, I painted on dark silver. Not a whole lot, just enough to break up the materials on my Big Daddies. Canvas and leather is another staple of diving suits. Luckily, these models have a lot of real estate to play with. To start off my leather areas, I based the straps and wrist guards with my dark umber. Originally, I wanted to paint the canvas cloth a dark blue or khaki, but that just didn't look right, especially when compared to my reference art. Instead, I decided all leather, all the time. Really leaning into the leather daddy vibes more than I intended to. Speaking of leather daddies, you know who's my favorite daddy? My patrons. Matthew Jerkowitz and Vex were kind enough to support me on Patreon and have been eternally added to my hobby toolbox. If you'd like to be my Patreon daddy, or you just like the goofy videos I make, consider supporting me on Patreon. We're painting a Warlord Titan at 1,000 patrons, the biggest Big Daddy of all Big Daddies. To differentiate my leather pants and sleeves from my wrist guards and leather straps, I hit them with black brown. This is a really desaturated dark brown. Honestly, it looks like something that is soaked with seawater. Fitting. I then hit all of my brown and leather areas with a highlight of light umber to sharpen up details, things like the ribs of the armor connections and tops of the straps. To tie the base and layering together, I then used a thinned down rattling grime over all of it. This will darken things as well as give the leather areas a satin finish. My silvers were looking kinda drab, they needed proper shading and gunk. Enter brown wash. Using a brush you don't care for, punch these areas with grime, really getting in there and hitting every nook. Wipe away the streaking grimes, raised areas with mineral spirits, and our models are mostly done. Just some headlamp OSL and bases fitting an underwater city. There is one thing about Big Daddies that is more iconic than anything: the glow of their helmet lenses. If it's green, you're free to hit that circus of values. If it's red, be prepared for your fleshy bits to end up on that wall over there. I'm painting them yellow, because who doesn't love mixed signals? To start this OSL effect, I lightly airbrushed white ink. I said lightly! Damn it, Blake. I then followed this with Iron Jaws Yellow, which is a dingy yellow, perfect for grimy lenses. To sell that this is a light source casting on nearby areas, I very carefully highlighted the sharpest points in each pool of light with golden yellow. Without this, it just looks like a yellow section of armor and not something with a source casting on it. If you know anything about Rapture floors, is that they are covered in rust, moss, and seawater. Oh, and countless copies of Atlas Shrugged. It's a joke for you book readers in the audience. My bases are still covered in dark umber, which should be a good base for dirty down rust. I think. I don't know, dirty down rust sometimes works on brown, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know, I still feel like I don't understand this paint, even though I like it. Once that sets, I dry brush some dark silver over the base to bring out all of those edges and icons. To fill in the areas around the metal floor bits, I added astrogranite debris. Once that dried, I added the old formula Nuln Oil to shade it. I'm thinking this is rubble or the ocean rock the flooring was built into. Using scenic glue, I sprinkled on AK Interactive's moss texture. This might be a bit too bright, but I honestly like the well-watered look of it. I then dabbed UV resin all over the base and sealed it with blacklight before it ran over the base edge. I wasn't always successful in this. To suggest movement and ripples, I dabbed on some transparent water gel. Kinda unnoticeable. Maybe blow it with an airbrush. Nah, you know what, skip this step and just paint the rim black. Now take a celebratory swig of your favorite spirit because our Big Daddy gangers are finished. It was mighty fun finishing this project. It's a simple one, and after painting 20 tanks in my last episode, I like simple. Also, it was really nice to reconnect with some core video game memories of mine. What gang should I paint next? I'm leaning towards the worshippers of skin and sinew. Until next time, subscribe, and happy painting.
Well, I'm happy on my own, making coffee just for one, and eating breakfast all alone. Fewer dishes to be done. I'm never running.